Have you ever felt like something inside you is holding you back? That voice telling you not to speak up, not to take risks, not to be seen. Maybe you've turned down opportunities because they seem too intimidating. Or perhaps you've noticed yourself judging others harshly for qualities you secretly wish you possessed. What if I told you that the parts of yourself you're most afraid to embrace might actually hold the key to your fulfillment? Imagine this scene. You're standing at a podium, hands shaking. The room is packed, hundreds of eyes fixed on you, waiting. You've rehearsed this presentation for weeks, but in this moment, everything vanishes. Your mouth goes dry. The silence grows heavier with each passing second. You want to run, to disappear, to become invisible rather than face what terrifies you most, being seen, being judged, potentially failing. Beneath your fear is a strange, almost electric sense of aliveness. This is precisely what Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung would describe as happening. That moment of paralyzing fear isn't just anxiety. It's a confrontation with your unlived life, with aspects of yourself you've been too afraid to embody. The most terrifying thing, Jung once wrote, is to accept oneself completely. And he was right, because in moments of terror like these, you're being invited to become more than you've allowed yourself to be. Today, I'm going to show you why becoming who you're afraid to be might be the most important journey you'll ever undertake. And I'll give you practical tools from Jung's psychological teachings to help you begin this transformation. To understand why you fear aspects of yourself, you first need to grasp Jung's model of the psyche. Unlike his mentor Freud, who saw the unconscious primarily as a repository for repressed sexual desires, Jung recognized something far more fascinating about your inner landscape. Your psyche consists of several interconnected systems. At the center is your ego, your conscious identity, the I that you present to the world. But the ego is merely the tip of your psychological iceberg. Beneath the surface lies your personal unconscious, containing forgotten memories, repressed experiences, and what Jung famously called the shadow, all the aspects of yourself that you've rejected, denied, or never developed. Beyond your personal unconscious lies what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared psychological inheritance that connects you to all of humanity. This collective unconscious contains archetypes, universal patterns, and images that appear in myths, dreams, and stories across all cultures. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung warned, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. This is where your journey begins, because what you fear becoming often represents the unconscious parts of yourself seeking expression. The shadow is perhaps Jung's most profound concept. It contains not just your darkest impulses, but also your unrealized potential, talents, abilities, and ways of being that you've rejected because they didn't fit with your self-image or were deemed unacceptable by your family or culture. Everyone carries a shadow, Jung wrote, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. Think about this for a moment. The parts of yourself that you refuse to acknowledge don't simply disappear, they grow stronger in the darkness of denial. Eventually, they find ways to express themselves, often through projection onto others or self-sabotage. Are you the strictly logical person who secretly yearns for creative expression but dismisses art as frivolous? Or the perpetually nice individual who can never say no but harbors growing resentment? Or perhaps the disciplined achiever who condemns relaxation while burning out from exhaustion? In each case, your shadow holds a disowned quality that actually contains tremendous potential for wholeness. But here's where Jung's insight becomes truly revolutionary. Your shadow isn't just negative. In fact, your greatest gifts often hide in the shadow because somewhere along the way, you learned that these parts of yourself were too much, too strange, or simply unacceptable. What aspects of yourself have you disowned? What parts of your personality have you pushed into the shadow because they frightened you? These questions aren't merely philosophical, they're the beginning of what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming your complete self. Before you can face your shadow, you must recognize your persona, the social mask you wear to function in society. Jung described the persona as a compromise between the individual and society as to what a person should appear to be. It's the version of yourself you present to the world, carefully curated to gain acceptance and avoid rejection. Your persona isn't inherently problematic. You need social adaptation. The issue arises when you mistake the mask for your true identity. The persona, Jung cautioned, is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others and, on the other, to conceal the true nature of the individual. Think about the various masks you wear: professional, parental, social. How often do you feel that these roles don't fully express who you are? That nagging sense of limitation, of playing a part rather than living authentically, is your psyche signaling that you've over-identified with your persona at the expense of your wholeness. When your persona becomes rigid, when you believe it's all you are, you inevitably feel fragmented and incomplete. And that incompleteness manifests as anxiety, depression, or a persistent feeling that something essential is missing from your life. At the core of Jung's psychology lies the concept of the self, not the ego self of everyday awareness, but your complete, integrated personality that includes both conscious and unconscious elements. The self represents psychological wholeness, the ultimate goal of your individuation process. The self, Jung wrote, is not only the center but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. Your journey toward the self, toward wholeness, requires that you expand your conscious awareness to include formerly unconscious aspects of your personality. And this necessarily means confronting what you fear becoming. When you avoid this confrontation, you remain fragmented, living a partial life. But your psyche naturally strives toward wholeness. It wants integration. This is why the parts of yourself that you've rejected will continually appear in your life, through dreams, through projection onto others, through mysterious patterns of behavior that you can't seem to change despite your best efforts. Your unlived life demands to be lived. One of Jung's most fascinating contributions was his concept of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that can't be explained by cause and effect. Jung observed that during significant psychological transitions, particularly when unconscious material is rising into awareness, you often experience striking coincidences that seem to reflect your inner psychological state. Have you ever thought of someone only to have them call you moments later? Or repeatedly encountered a symbol or theme that seems mysteriously relevant to a personal struggle? Jung would suggest that these aren't merely random coincidences, but meaningful connections between your psyche and the external world. Synchronicities often increase when you're engaged with shadow material, as if the universe itself is encouraging your integration. They remind you that the boundary between inner and outer reality is more permeable than you typically recognize, and that your psychological transformation has significance beyond your individual life. So why should you become who you're afraid to be? Because what you fear becoming is often precisely what you need to become whole. The qualities and capacities that frighten you most likely represent essential aspects of your complete self. Aspects that, when integrated rather than rejected, lead to a fuller, more authentic life. If you're the quiet person who fears being assertive, your shadow may hold tremendous leadership capacity. If you're the logical thinker who disdains emotion, your shadow likely contains deep wells of empathy. If you're chronically serious and fear appearing foolish, you might discover joy and spontaneity in your shadow. When you avoid these disowned aspects of yourself, you don't just limit your potential, you actively work against yourself. The energy required to constantly repress parts of your nature depletes you and creates internal conflict that manifests as anxiety, depression, or disconnection from life. But when you dare to become what you fear, extraordinary things happen. Energy previously used for repression becomes available for creative expression. Internal conflicts diminish, leading to greater psychological harmony. And most importantly, you experience a profound sense of coming home to yourself, of finally living as the complete being you were meant to be. If you're finding value in these psychological insights and want to continue exploring the depths of Jungian psychology, consider subscribing to this channel. Each week, we dive into powerful concepts that can transform your understanding of yourself and others. So how do you begin the process of becoming what you fear? Jung offered several pathways for accessing and integrating shadow material. Dream analysis. Your dreams often reveal shadow content through characters or situations that contrast with your conscious attitude. Pay special attention to dream figures that disturb you. They often represent disowned aspects of yourself seeking integration. Active imagination. Find a quiet space, focus on an inner image or feeling, and allow it to develop while maintaining conscious awareness. Ask questions of your shadow figures and listen for their responses. Trigger awareness. Notice when you have strong emotional reactions to others. These triggers often indicate projection. You're seeing in others what you refuse to acknowledge in yourself. Ask yourself, what quality in this person am I reacting to, and how might it exist in me? Creative expression. Art, writing, dance, and other creative outlets provide channels for shadow material to emerge safely. Create without censorship and observe what appears. Body awareness. Your body often expresses what your conscious mind rejects. Notice physical sensations, especially tension or discomfort, when confronting challenging situations or people. Honest dialogue. Find trusted friends or a qualified therapist with whom you can explore your less acceptable thoughts and feelings without judgment. The goal isn't to eliminate your shadow, that's impossible and undesirable, but to bring it into relationship with your consciousness. When shadow content is acknowledged and integrated, its energy becomes available for constructive use rather than unconscious sabotage. Jung was fascinated by alchemy, seeing in its symbolism a perfect metaphor for psychological transformation. The alchemists sought to turn lead into gold, and Jung recognized this as a parallel to the process of transforming your shadow, the lead of your personality, into consciousness, psychological gold. This alchemical process involves several stages. First comes the nigredo, or blackening, your confrontation with shadow aspects that initially feels like darkness or despair. This is when you acknowledge the parts of yourself you've rejected. Next is the albedo, or whitening, when you begin to understand these shadow elements compassionately, seeing their origins and purpose in your psychological development. Then comes the citrinitas, or yellowing, where you discover the value in what you've feared, recognizing that your shadow contains not just your darkness, but your unrealized light. Finally, there's the rubedo, or reddening, the integration of shadow material into your conscious personality, resulting in greater wholeness and vitality. In all chaos there is a cosmos, Jung wrote. In all disorder, a secret order. The apparent chaos of confronting your fears ultimately reveals a deeper order, the architecture of your complete self. Jung's insights extend beyond individual psychology. Just as you have a shadow, so do families, organizations, and societies. The collective shadow contains all that a group denies about itself. We see the collective shadow erupting in prejudice, war, environmental destruction, and other forms of collective harm. When societies refuse to acknowledge their shadow aspects, these qualities are typically projected onto others who become scapegoats. By doing your individual shadow work, you not only transform your personal life, but contribute to collective healing. Each person who integrates their shadow reduces the burden of projection in the larger human family. As Jung put it, as far as we can discern, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. There's a profound paradox in Jung's invitation to become who you're afraid to be. In facing your fears and integrating your shadow, you don't become something alien. You become more authentically yourself. What you fear is not becoming something you're not, but rather becoming who you truly are beneath the adaptations and defenses you've accumulated. The foundation of all mental illness, Jung observed, is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. And there is legitimate suffering in confronting your shadow. It hurts to acknowledge the parts of yourself you've rejected. It's painful to realize how you've limited yourself through fear. But beyond this necessary suffering lies the joy of wholeness, a state of being that Jung believed was your birthright and purpose. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, he wrote, but by integration of the contraries. In essence, Jung's psychology invites you to live your complete story rather than the edited version you've deemed acceptable. It challenges you to reclaim the full range of your humanity, the light and the dark, the beautiful and the terrible, the conventional and the wild. When you become who you're afraid to be, you don't abandon responsibility or ethics. Instead, you develop a more nuanced, compassionate relationship with yourself and others. You recognize that wholeness isn't perfection, but completeness, the integration of all aspects of your being. I am not what happened to me, Jung wrote. I am what I choose to become. And sometimes the most powerful choice you can make is to become precisely what you've feared becoming, to step into the fullness of your potential despite the terror of the unknown. What aspect of yourself are you afraid to become? What quality have you kept in shadow that's asking for expression? Perhaps it's your power, your vulnerability, your creativity, your anger, your joy, or your truth. Whatever it is, it's an essential part of your wholeness, a fragment of your complete self waiting to be reclaimed. The journey of becoming who you're afraid to be isn't a destination, but a continuous unfolding, a lifelong process of expanding into your full humanity. It's challenging work, but as Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. So take the first step today. Face your fear, embrace your shadow, and discover the extraordinary freedom of becoming your complete self. Your unlived life is waiting for you to claim it.